Hello, and welcome to The Scientist and the Sleep, where every night is a journey as light as a breath, guiding you through the most peaceful corners of the universe. Tonight, let all thoughts slow down, let your eyes gently close, and your mind drift through the quiet space around the sun, where Mercury, small yet mysterious, keeps silently orbiting in the radiant warmth. Before we begin this journey, I'd love to know where on Earth you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. If you enjoy gentle voyages and stories just enough to lull your mind, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay until the end of the video, because who knows, in tonight's dream, you might carry with you a few small secrets of Mercury. And if you happen to fall asleep along the way, that's perfectly fine, because sometimes the most beautiful dreams begin with stories left unfinished. If you could stand on the surface of Mercury, you would see a landscape that no words could fully describe. The sky is not blue, not cloudy, just a deep, endless black, even when the sun blazes fiercely above. Our central star, appearing 3 times larger than it does from Earth, hangs suspended in the sky, scorching everything it touches. Daytime temperatures here can exceed 430 degrees Celsius, enough to melt lead. But as soon as night falls, that heat vanishes and the temperature plunges to nearly minus 180 degrees Celsius. A world where day and night are not just two halves of a rotation, but two opposites, one burning, one frozen, divided by the fragile boundary of time. At the border between light and darkness, there are mountains casting shadows that stretch for dozens of kilometers, and towering cliffs formed as this planet slowly shrank while cooling down. Every ridge, every canyon is a page in the ancient diary Mercury has written with its own body. There is no rain or wind to erase the traces of time, no atmosphere to blur the memories etched deep. That surface, in absolute silence, preserves almost perfectly the earliest chapters of the solar system's history, as if this place were a library of stone, where every crack is a line telling the story of formation, collision, and cosmic change. Yet within that silence, Mercury speaks louder than ever. It tells us that smallness does not mean weakness. Beneath its thin crust lies a massive iron core that makes up more than 80% of the planet's diameter, the highest ratio among the rocky planets. No one knows for sure why it possesses such a large heart. Perhaps in the early chaotic days, Mercury was struck by a colossal body that blasted away most of its outer layer, leaving behind only the heavy metallic core. Or perhaps from the very beginning, it was born in a region where lighter materials could not survive under the sun's fierce heat. Whatever the reason, the result remains the same, a small planet carrying within it the largest iron heart in the solar system. This very heart, though cooling, still stirs faintly, generating a fragile magnetic field, only about 1% of Earth's. This has puzzled scientists for decades. A planet this small, spinning this slowly, should be a cold, inert lump of iron. Yet Mercury remains alive, still breathing in its own rhythm. Perhaps deep within, part of that iron core is still molten, swirling like a tiny heart that refuses to stop beating. When radar and magnetometers aboard probes recorded those faint signals, humanity suddenly realized that even in silence, Mercury continues to speak in its own voice. And then, in the eternally dark regions at its north and south poles, where sunlight has never touched, radar from Earth detected the unthinkable: ice, water ice, existing on the planet closest to the sun. This contrast is a stunning metaphor of the universe, that even in the most barren and hostile places, something pure and gentle can remain. Perhaps it is the remnant of comets that once struck its surface, leaving layers of ice trapped in the deep shadow for billions of years. Or perhaps it is vapor rising from Mercury's interior, forever imprisoned in those frozen craters. Whatever the case, that image makes humanity fall silent, ice within fire, stillness within motion, a world of paradox where within it we glimpse the beauty of balance. When humankind first sent a probe to Mercury, Mariner 10 in 1974, we saw only half the planet, the rest cloaked in darkness. Yet that half alone was enough to open a new chapter in human understanding. The photos it sent back revealed a world full of craters, resembling the moon, yet profoundly different in detail. There were no signs of young lava flows or tectonic motion. Everything seemed ancient and still, as if time itself had stopped there. Nearly 40 years later, the Messenger spacecraft continued the mission, becoming the first to orbit Mercury and giving us our first complete view. It discovered immense cliffs, kilometers high and hundreds of kilometers long, evidence that Mercury had contracted as its core cooled, causing its crust to crack and fold like wrinkles on the aging face of the cosmos. That data did more than tell Mercury's story. It revealed something about us, that no world is ever truly silent. Every planet has its own rhythm, its own way of existing within the vast emptiness. Mercury teaches us that smallness does not diminish worth, that even if it can only be seen for a few minutes at dawn or dusk, it still compels us to look up, to ponder, and to ask questions. If you are listening to this in the dark, imagine you are standing at the twilight boundary on Mercury. One half of your body is plunged in icy darkness, the other bathed in sunlight. Nowhere on Earth can you feel such balance between heat and cold, light and shadow, motion and stillness. And in that moment, you may realize balance is not about standing still, but about knowing how to exist between two extremes without being consumed by either. That is the first lesson Mercury offers us, a whisper from the world closest to the sun. Even when scorched, we can still keep a corner of ice. Even in silence, we can still resonate. If you stood on the surface of Mercury, the first thing that would astonish you would not be the emptiness, but the feeling of a world that has endured every extreme. The sky here has no blue. It is an absolute black void, even at midday, because this planet has almost no atmosphere to scatter light. The sun, enormous and dazzling, 3 times larger than it appears from Earth, hangs in the sky like a sacred flame. But don't let that light deceive you. Just by stepping to the other side of the planet, where eternal darkness reigns, the temperature drops from over 430 degrees Celsius to nearly minus 180 degrees Celsius. The entire planet seems to live only through contrast. There is no wind, no clouds, no sound to break the silence. Mercury's silence is a primordial kind of silence, as if this place has never been touched by any life or sound. Every rock, every impact crater is a fossilized memory, preserving the scars from the early days of the solar system, when matter, dust, and asteroids collided violently to shape the planets. Massive circular basins and towering cliffs stretching for hundreds of kilometers all speak of a world forged in violence, but preserved almost perfectly because there is no weather to erase it. The images from the Messenger spacecraft once left scientists in awe. They realized Mercury is not merely a small, dry planet, it is shrinking. Yes, the planet is gradually contracting over time. As its massive iron core cools, its volume decreases, causing the outer crust to wrinkle, forming cliffs several kilometers high, monumental wrinkles on its ancient face. This is not destruction, but the mark of time itself, a legacy displayed more clearly here than anywhere else in the solar system. And then there are regions where darkness reigns forever. At Mercury's poles, within deep craters that sunlight never reaches, radar detected bright signals of water ice. A strange paradox: ice on the planet closest to the sun, yet science confirmed it to be true. The ice is protected by the eternal cold of shadow, surviving for millions of years, a testament to the delicate balance between heat and cold, light and darkness. Somehow, Mercury has managed to preserve water, even if only in hibernation, in the place that seems the driest in our nearby universe. If you could look beneath that rocky shell, you would see the planet's metallic heart, making up over 80% of its total diameter, the largest core-to-size ratio in the solar system. That core is not completely solid. It still holds enough energy to generate a faint magnetic field. The existence of this field once amazed scientists. How could a small, airless, cold, and ancient world still maintain its electromagnetic heartbeat? The answer may lie in the fact that Mercury still has a layer of molten iron moving slowly within, creating a dynamo effect, a reminder that even the quietest planet still has motion and life deep inside. But Mercury is more than a physical object. It is a symbol of limits, the boundary between light and darkness, between what is seen and what cannot be seen. Each time it briefly appears in the twilight sky, we are not merely seeing a planet, but the reflection of human patience itself. For to observe it, you must wait for the right moment, the right angle, the right conditions, much like seeking meaning in the faint space between two worlds. The ancients sensed this long before telescopes existed. To them, Mercury was the messenger, the bridge between gods and humans, between knowledge and speech. And intriguingly, thousands of years later, this very planet helped humanity confirm Einstein's general theory of relativity, one of the greatest theories ever conceived. When astronomers noticed that Mercury's orbit drifted a few arc seconds per century beyond Newton's predictions, they suspected another planet was pulling it, one they named Vulcan. But there was no Vulcan. The answer lay instead in the curvature of spacetime near the Sun, just as Einstein had foretold. From then on, Mercury became a witness to the evolution of thought, from myth to mathematics, from belief to understanding. It teaches us that the smallest and most humble things can reveal the greatest truths. In its fleeting shimmer on the horizon, humanity found answers to the deepest questions about the universe. Today, as the Bepi-Colombo spacecraft continues its long journey toward Mercury, we once again follow in the footsteps of ancient chroniclers. But this time, instead of carving on clay or parchment, we record with data, with radio waves, with laser light reflected from the planet's surface. Those cold lines of data, if you look closely, are much like old prayers, sent into space, hoping for a reply. Because in the end, Mercury doesn't just tell its own story, it tells ours, the story of a species that yearns to touch the untouchable, to understand the unseen. In its dim light, amid heat and cold, stillness and motion, we recognize our own inner journey of opposites, reason and intuition, data and emotion, light and darkness. And when this video ends, if you're still awake, try stepping out onto your balcony and looking toward the western horizon on a clear evening. Perhaps in that faint patch of sky, you'll see a small spark of light, appearing for a moment, then disappearing. Know that it is not just a planet orbiting the sun. It is a silent greeting from the little messenger that has connected millennia of human observation, knowledge, and dreams. If you could stand on a plateau of Mercury, you would see a world carved by the memories of collisions. Every crater is a letter etched into stone, telling the story of an era when the sun and planets were still young, when space was a battlefield of dust and rock. One of the most striking marks is the Caloris Basin, a colossal circle over 1,500 kilometers wide, large enough to swallow all of Italy. The force of the impact melted the crust, leaving behind a crater surrounded by tiered walls like surging waves. And on the opposite side of the planet, seismic waves converged, distorting the terrain to form what is known as chaotic terrain, where rocks appear to have been flung upward and fallen back down at random. There, time seems to have frozen in a moment of pure chaos. Beyond those ancient wounds lie vast flat plains, formed from lava that once poured out from the planet's interior. A world that appears motionless still carries traces of inner movement, enormous folds stretching hundreds of kilometers long, like dry wrinkles on the skin of a giant slowly cooling. These wrinkles, called lobate scarps, are the result of contraction as Mercury's massive metallic core cooled and shrank. The entire planet became slightly smaller, only by a few kilometers, but enough to cause the crust to crack, push upward, and stack upon itself. The scene feels as though the planet were embracing itself in the final convulsion of its formation. But Mercury is not merely a frozen fossil. Beneath its thin crust, its iron core remains partly active. When the Messenger spacecraft flew past in the 21st century, it detected a weak but real magnetic field, only 1% as strong as Earth's, yet proof that this planet has not completely fallen asleep. Part of its core is still molten, enough to generate electric currents and a magnetic field. In the absolute silence of space, Mercury still whispers in the language of electromagnetism, proof that its heart still beats. It is thanks to that faint magnetic field that Mercury's surface is not entirely barren. Although it lacks an atmosphere in the usual sense, the planet has a ghost atmosphere, an extremely thin exosphere where atoms of sodium, potassium, oxygen, and even helium wander freely, pushed away by the solar wind and then fall back down. Each atom exists for only a few hours before being swept into space, but that fragility itself is a beautiful testament to nature's delicate balance. Even in the driest of places, there is still a breath, however brief. When sunlight strikes the metallic surface, Mercury gleams with shades of silvery gray and faint orange-red glowing like a smoldering gem. In the dark, temperatures can drop to minus 170 degrees Celsius. Under sunlight, they can soar above 400 degrees Celsius. Nowhere else in the solar system does such an intense contrast exist over such a short distance. The site reminds one of the fragility of balance, that even within a small system, everything seeks harmony between two extremes. From a scientific perspective, Mercury opens the door to questions about how planets form. Because it lies so close to the Sun, it was bombarded by strong solar winds and lost nearly all its lighter material. As a result, its core makes up more than half its volume, an enormous ratio. Perhaps in its early days, Mercury was larger, then struck by a violent impact that blasted away much of its crust. Or perhaps it was born in a region so hot that lighter elements could not condense. Whatever the cause, the result is a planet compressed by metal, a bare nucleus of the solar system. When we look at Mercury, we are seeing the exposed core of a planet, something that normally lies buried beneath thousands of kilometers of rock. Modern exploration missions have deepened our understanding but also revealed new mysteries. Messenger, and soon Europe and Japan's Bepi Colombo, have sent back detailed images down to the centimeter, revealing unexpectedly bright regions near the poles, where radar reflections suggest the presence of water ice on a planet closest to the Sun. In deep craters where sunlight never reaches, temperatures are so low that water can exist as ice for billions of years. A brilliant paradox: within a scorched planet lies frozen pockets preserving traces of purity. If Venus is radiant and proud and Earth is the cradle of life, then Mercury is the silent sage, observing, recording, and holding within itself the lessons of existence. No atmosphere, no green, no seasons, no rain, yet there are cycles, rhythms, and a precision almost meditative. Each rotation, each oscillation, each subtle adjustment in its orbit is like a metaphor for hidden order within chaos. In the light of knowledge, Mercury is no longer the swift god of astrology, but a true messenger, a metallic Hermes carrying the universe's message to humankind, that every motion, however small, has purpose, that even in silence, a story is told through orbit, through rotation, through reflected light. If you close your eyes, you can imagine, in the darkness between stars, a glimmering metallic marble spinning around the sun at nearly 48 kilometers per second. No sound, no echo, only orbit, a graceful curve drawn upon the fabric of space-time. Each time it completes a revolution, it bows slightly, as if to remind us that even the smallest things may hold answers to the grandest questions. And when you open your eyes, gazing at the sky during dusk or dawn, where a small, stubborn light flickers and vanishes, remember that you are seeing that messenger, the silent recorder of the cosmos, the keeper of rhythm between day and night, between theory and reality, between humanity and the sun. Under the harsh sunlight of the sun, those bright regions flare up as if sprinkled with metallic powder, reflecting an elusive silvery light, a sign that something special lies just beneath the pale gray dust. When the Messenger spacecraft first captured them in high resolution, scientists were astonished. Those bright spots were not merely rocks reflecting light more strongly, but evidence of an entirely new process, a young, fresh layer of material untouched by time or the solar wind. These structures, called hollows, are Mercury's open wounds, small, scattered pits formed when volatile minerals vaporized from the surface. On a world believed to be ancient and inert, the presence of such youthful pits is like discovering a beating vein within a fossilized body. The hollows appear in many forms, from single pits just a few dozen meters wide to mottled clusters spreading across kilometers. They often lie along the inner slopes of craters, where rock layers are exposed and can directly face sunlight. Some clusters are so large that researchers liken them to erosion gardens, where volatile materials slowly sublimate, leaving behind a honeycomb-like landscape. Mercury, the planet closest to the Sun, should have been stripped of all volatiles billions of years ago, yet the existence of hollows reveals that it still harbors pockets of light materials, possibly sulfides, chlorides, or strange metallic compounds. In other words, Mercury is not entirely dead. It is still breathing, though with the incredibly slow breath of an aging world. Those bright marks under the gaze of science tell an inverted story. Instead of a surface merely scorched and frozen, Mercury is a place where light and shadow, heat and cold, impact and melting coexist in a fragile equilibrium. In a place where temperature differences can span hundreds of degrees over just a few steps, even a small amount of volatile matter can trigger spectacular transformations. When dust grains are heated by the sun to their limits, they lose their lighter components. leaving behind denser, brighter minerals that form the shimmering wounds seen through the lenses of robotic explorers. If you imagine the scene through your own eyes, standing on the rim of an ancient crater at Mercury's noon, under a pitch black sky with the sun swollen to twice its usual size, the hollows would look like gentle patches of light falling upon a field of cooled ash. The air is perfectly still, yet the light seems to have weight pressing down on each grain of dust, making them glow and fade. Each step you take, the contrast between brightness and shadow seems to shift with the planet's breath. An absolute silence envelops everything, and you realize that what we call time here does not flow as it does on Earth. It sinks, seeping into each layer of rock, each impact mark, each scar upon the surface. Planetary geologists often call Mercury a metallic diary. Inside it lies an unusually high proportion of iron. Nearly two-thirds of the planet's mass is its iron core, leaving the crust as a thin skin wrapped around a metallic heart. No one knows exactly why. One hypothesis suggests that a colossal impact in the early solar system blasted away most of its original crust, leaving a bare core behind. Another proposes that from its very birth, Mercury condensed in an exceptionally hot region near the Sun, accumulating only heavy elements. Either way, the result is a compact, dense world, bearing a weak yet persistent magnetic field, evidence that its core remains partially molten. This reveals an elegant paradox. The smallest planet has the largest core. On Earth, the iron core makes up less than one-third of its radius. On Mercury, it accounts for more than half. In the silence of space, that core still turns slowly, generating a magnetic field too weak to shield an atmosphere, yet strong enough to assert that something inside still stirs. Some scientists even believe that the hollows may be indirectly linked to this core activity, that heat or gases escaping through deep fissures rise upward, vaporizing the surface layer. It is as if Mercury were writing the final pages of its diary with its own breath of molten iron. But Mercury does not speak only of itself. It is a doorway looking back into the dawn of the planets. When scientists measured the isotopic composition of its heavy elements, they found traces of processes that shaped the entire solar system. From the first condensation of metallic dust around the young sun to the chaotic collisions of worlds still battling for orbits. Every crater, every lava plain, every bright patch on its surface is a note in that cosmic chronicle. From humanity's perspective, Mercury is a place to test the limits of understanding. It was this planet that forced Newton to yield to Einstein, that made classical gravity give way to the curvature of space-time. And now, as we gaze upon those tiny bright patches, perhaps it is challenging us once more, that even in the driest and seemingly most motionless place in the solar system, change still happens, silently, patiently, and more profoundly than we imagine. If you listen closely, not with your ears, but with your imagination, you might hear the faint creaking of its metallic crust contracting, the tiny clinks of falling iron dust like rain, and the distant whisper of gravity pulling Mercury along its orbit around the sun. A small, burning, and silent planet, holding within itself both the past of matter and the future of understanding. And when you leave it, turning your gaze toward the distant blue Earth, you will understand why scientists keep returning to Mercury's data. Not merely because they want to know how hot it once was or how it has cooled, but because, in every lingering bright scar upon its surface, they see something profoundly human, the desire to understand, to touch the source of our own beginnings, even if it means looking through the silvery dust of a world without a sky. The shockwaves from the calorous impact did not stop at the mountain ring. They raced through Mercury's interior, echoing to the opposite side like the resonance within a colossal stone bell. There, at the antipodal point, the ground shattered, twisted, and heaved upward into a distorted pattern unlike anything else in the solar system. The ripples of energy that once shook the crust met, collided, and folded in silence, leaving behind a rugged field seemingly warped by the very heartbeat of the planet. From orbit, this region looks like a sea of frozen rock caught mid-quake. Small hills crowd together, rising and falling unevenly, as if the crust had been crumpled by some unseen hand and never fully smoothed out. Each rock is a coarse note in a symphony halted midway. Cracks intersect in all directions without any clear pattern, so that when sunlight sweeps across them, it casts long shadows like silent lines of music fleeing away. Scientists call this place weird terrain, and though the name is accurate, it still cannot contain its full wonder. Imagine this. When the Caloris impact occurred, the released energy was not only enough to carve out the mountain ring, but also to penetrate the entire planet. That wave converged on the far side, compressing, fracturing, and uplifting the crust. Like a physical echo, like it left behind the imprint not only of force, but of memory. Each fracture is a reminder that Mercury is not just an inert lump of rock, but a world that once breathed, once trembled from its own core. When the faint sunlight glides across those rocks, they shimmer and then sink back into shadow. Some glow with the orange hue of iron oxide, others reflect a pale silver light, all blending into a flickering field that seems to move within stillness itself. In the thin air of absolute solitude, untouched by wind or rain, Mercury exposes its entire face, raw, unpainted, and unmasked. Images from the Messenger spacecraft revealed something intriguing. This weird terrain was shaped not only by impact shock, but also by Mercury's global contraction. As the planet cooled, its outer crust shrank, compressing ancient faults and forming massive cliffs called lobate scarps. These rocky walls look like wrinkles on the planet's face, marks of time etched by the slow pressure of billions of years. Some rise hundreds of meters high, stretch for hundreds of kilometers, cutting across old craters as if time itself had traced new veins over a canvas already full of scars. If Earth's moon seems still, Mercury is 100-fold more silent, but within that stillness lies the weight of memory. There are no oceans to blur the boundaries, no rain to erode history. Every mark, every dent, every ridge is a page that has never been turned. That is why, when we look at Mercury, we are not merely seeing a planet, we are seeing time fossilized. Smaller craters scattered across the surface form interwoven patterns. Some have faint, bright halos showing they are young. Others are darkened, worn down by cosmic rays and micrometeorites over hundreds of millions of years. In the thick, black night of space, Mercury spins slowly, as if presenting each of its faces for the sun to read, chapter by chapter, each line written in dust and fire. There are moments when a passing spacecraft captures sunlight reflecting from pale deposits, the same hollows you saw at the beginning of this journey. They shine like mirrors, creating a strange shimmering effect. Researchers believe these could be traces of volatile minerals such as sulfur or sodium that once escaped from the interior and were altered by sunlight. If that's true, Mercury is not completely dead. It still breathes faintly through those tiny fissures. Paradoxically, the planet closest to the sun bears the shape of the deepest silence, but that is precisely what makes it so compelling. In silence, Mercury tells its story more clearly than any other world. Without oceans, winds, or rain, with only rock, iron, and light, it still speaks in the oldest language the universe knows, the language of form. And if you look long enough, you'll see that the circular craters do not repeat themselves meaninglessly. They resemble musical notes on the grand score of existence. Each impact is a chord, each cooled lava plain a pause, each ridge, each fracture, the deep drumbeat of time. Together they form a symphony that only Mercury, the planet closest to the sun, could perform. That is why when you gaze at it, even through a screen, you can feel something strange. A peace so profound it's as if you can hear the universe breathing. In the place where the sun blazes brightest, Mercury exists not to shine, but to reflect. Reflecting light, reflecting the past, and reflecting humanity's own idea of stillness. If Earth is the story of life and Mars is the story of longing, then Mercury is the story of memory. A world no longer moving much, yet still echoing with the reverberations of what once was. It teaches us that even in silence there is motion, only so slow that no one notices. And perhaps, as you lie still listening to these words, in the darkness of your room, Mercury too is gliding along its orbit, turning slowly through a sea of light, quiet as a bass note of the sun, a low note carrying within it the echo of impact, the breath of magma, and the silence of billions of years. A small planet, yet one that holds the entire prologue to the radiant universe we live in. Caloris is a gateway to the past, a colossal scar, and at the same time, a natural recording that preserves the echoes of a planetary formation era. It was created about 3.9 billion years ago during the late heavy bombardment, when the inner solar system was still a battlefield of primordial fragments colliding and rearranging themselves. In that era, every impact not only carved deep craters, but also etched into the planet's surfaces the most primitive memories. Calorus is one of those memories. Ancient, violent, yet preserved almost intact, as if time moves slower on Mercury than anywhere else. On Earth, similar traces have long been erased. Continents drift, mountains rise and erode, layers of sediment pile up over hundreds of millions of years. But Mercury, with no wind, no rain, no oceans, and almost no atmosphere, has kept nearly all of its past. Under the harsh sunlight, that surface looks like a photograph freezing a chaotic moment where time stopped and history fossilized right on the planet's skin. If you imagine Mercury as a giant metallic instrument, then Calorus is the first strike that resonated through its core. When the celestial body slammed down, shockwaves not only rippled across the surface but also passed through the crust and mantle, meeting again on the opposite side, at the antipode. There, the energy converged like sound echoing in a whispering gallery, bending, warping, shattering, and uplifting the ground. The result is a landscape both chaotic and ordered, rugged yet strangely balanced. People call it the weird terrain, but if you were standing there, you'd understand. The strangeness isn't just in its shape, but in the feeling it evokes. The ground seems as if a giant hand had kneaded it from within. Rock blocks tilt and lean as if struggling to stay upright after a tremor. Small valleys twist like frozen waves, winding between overlapping ridges. No large impact craters intrude here, only traces of energy once converged, dispersed, then froze midway. Scientists believe that when Calorus formed, ejecta from the impact might have fallen back onto the antipodal region, layering it with rough material over an already deformed terrain. Under the sun's glaring light, the rock surfaces reflect metallic hues, dimly gleaming like uneven mirrors. When the Messenger spacecraft flew past, its cameras captured this scene, a sea of stone solidified mid-storm, each ridge a deep note, each fissure a pause. What makes this landscape so captivating is not just the geometric beauty of chaos, but its almost deliberate symmetry in nature. On one side of the planet, the impact formed the Calorus Basin, a deep depression with concentric rings like a flower. On the other side, energy focused to raise a field of warped rocky hills. These two opposites, concave and convex, negative and positive, balance each other in a structure so intricate it feels poetic. Mercury somehow turned an act of destruction into a perfect symphony. Perhaps that's why many researchers call Mercury the planet of echoes. Every crater, ridge, and crack on its surface is a lingering resonance of past moments. At Calorus, the echo is of raw energy, violent and magnificent. In the weird terrain, that echo becomes the hum of balance, of nature restoring calm after turmoil. If you listen with your mind, you can feel Mercury's slow breathing. It spins slowly, completing 3 rotations for every 2 orbits around the sun, a strange yet steady rhythm, like the quiet heartbeat of an ancient being. Each sunrise on Mercury lasts nearly 176 Earth days, making sunlight crawl slowly across its surface, caressing every cliff, every fissure, every wrinkle of the planet. In the weird terrain, that light seeps through tilted ridges, casting long shadows like the hands of a clock. Except here, time doesn't run, it settles. And in that stillness, Mercury teaches us about the persistence of memory. While Earth constantly changes, erasing and rewriting itself, Mercury chooses to keep every wound. It doesn't regenerate, doesn't hide, it accepts. From Calorus to the weird terrain, everything stands as witness to a single moment, yet powerful enough to shape billions of years of history. Some say looking at Mercury is like gazing at a piece of music that stopped midway, where the final note still reverberates endlessly. Calorus is the deep tone, the weird terrain is the lingering sound, and between them lies the survival of memory. Something even the sun, though it burns without rest, cannot scorch away. So when you look at its image, even just on a screen in the quiet of your room, remember that you are seeing a moment stretched across 3.9 billion years. A moment where energy, sound, and matter met to create eternal art. Mercury, the smallest and least noticed planet, carries within it a cosmic symphony, where every crater, every ridge, every ray of light is a note played in silence.